Billings up to Clark. Clark takes her first shot. Finds herself down low, kicks it out to Caitlin Clark. Clark puts it up. Getting themselves prepared for the World Cup that they've already qualified for, but really not letting their foot off the glass on offense.
Why would a team bring its most electric player back after months away, only to keep her on the bench? That's the question fans started asking the moment Caitlin Clark returned to the court. Officially, the explanation sounded harmless. Coaches suggested it was simply a cautious approach, easing Clark back into the game after nearly 200 days away from competition. According to the narrative, starting veteran guard Chelsea Gray was about experience and stability. But the moment the game actually unfolded, many observers felt the story didn't quite add up. Because the difference was immediate. When Clark was sitting, the offense looked slow and predictable. Possessions dragged into half-court sets, and the pace felt controlled but stagnant. But as soon as Clark stepped onto the floor, the entire rhythm of the game shifted. The ball started moving faster, teammates began cutting into open space, and the defense suddenly looked stretched in ways it hadn't just minutes earlier. And then came the numbers. In limited minutes, Clark finished with 17 points, 12 assists, and a +35 rating, a statistical impact that's extremely rare in professional basketball. A plus-minus that high usually means one thing: the team completely dominated while that player was on the floor. It wasn't just scoring or passing. It was the way Clark altered the geometry of the court itself. Defenders had to guard her the moment she crossed half-court because of her deep shooting range. That pressure created openings everywhere else. Teammates found easier shots, transition plays appeared out of nowhere, and the offense suddenly felt alive. Which is exactly why the bench decision sparked such a massive debate. Fans immediately began asking whether this was truly a strategic move or if something deeper was happening behind the scenes. Because when a player changes the flow of the entire game, the way Clark did that night, keeping her off the floor becomes a decision that people simply can't stop talking about. The moment Caitlin Clark finally stepped onto the floor, the numbers started telling a story that was impossible to ignore. For weeks, fans had debated how she would look returning after a long absence from the game. Would there be rust? Would the pace of competition slow her down? Those questions disappeared almost instantly once the stat line from that night appeared. Clark finished the game with 17 points and 12 assists, but the statistic that truly shocked analysts was her +35 rating. In basketball, plus-minus measures how much a team outperforms the opponent while a player is on the floor. A number that high usually means one thing: the entire flow of the game shifts when that player checks in. And that's exactly what seemed to happen. When Clark was on the court, the offense looked completely different. The ball moved faster, players cut with more confidence, and transition opportunities appeared that hadn't existed earlier in the game. Her passing immediately opened space for teammates, creating easier shots that simply weren't there before. That's the hidden impact of a playmaker like Clark. Defenses can't focus on just one threat. Because of her deep shooting range, defenders have to start guarding her the moment she crosses half-court. That pressure stretches the defense far beyond its normal shape. Once the defense expands, passing lanes open everywhere else. Suddenly, teammates are getting open looks at the rim, corner shooters have space, and the entire offense feels faster. Those 12 assists weren't just simple passes leading to baskets. Many came from reading defensive rotations before they even fully formed. Clark often delivered the ball to teammates the exact moment defenders hesitated, turning small openings into easy scoring chances. That's why the +35 number became such a talking point after the game. It wasn't just about scoring or passing individually. It reflected how dramatically the team's performance changed when she was on the floor. In limited minutes, Clark helped drive one of the most dominant stretches of the entire game. And that's where the real debate started. Because if the team looked that different with Clark running the offense, fans began asking an uncomfortable question: why was she coming off the bench in the first place? What truly separates Caitlin Clark from most players isn't just the scoring or the flashy highlights. It's the way her presence completely reshapes the floor the moment she touches the ball. In basketball terms, people often call it spacing, but with Clark, the effect is much more dramatic. The reason starts with her shooting range. Most guards become a scoring threat once they reach the three-point line. Defenders usually give players a step or two of space until they approach the arc. But Clark changes that entire defensive rule. Because she can consistently hit shots from well beyond the logo, defenders can't wait until she reaches the three-point line. They have to start guarding her almost immediately after she crosses half-court. That one adjustment stretches the defense in a way very few players can. When a defender steps up that early, the rest of the defense has to shift to compensate. Suddenly, the paint becomes less crowded, help defenders are pulled farther away from the basket, and passing lanes begin to appear in places that normally wouldn't exist. It's like pulling the entire defense outward, creating space everywhere else on the court. And Clark knows exactly how to use that space. Once defenders extend themselves to stop the deep shot, she begins attacking the gaps that open up behind them. Sometimes it's a quick pass to a cutting teammate slipping behind the defense. Other times, it's a drive into the lane before the help defense can rotate. And if defenders hesitate even for a second, Clark simply pulls up and shoots. That constant pressure forces opposing teams into difficult choices. Guard her too tightly, and teammates get open looks at the rim. Collapse the defense to protect the paint, and Clark finds shooters waiting on the perimeter. Try to trap her with double teams, and she often spots the open player before the defense even finishes rotating. This is why analysts often say Clark bends the defense. The entire structure of the opposing team shifts just to deal with her presence. Even when she doesn't score, the defensive attention she commands creates opportunities for everyone else on the floor. And that's exactly why so many observers believe the offense operates at a completely different level whenever Clark is the one controlling the game. But the real tension around this situation isn't just about stats or highlights. It's about something deeper that has existed in sports for decades: the clash between established veterans and a rising superstar who is changing the game faster than anyone expected. For years, players like Chelsea Gray have built their reputations through championships, leadership, and experience at the highest level. Veterans such as Breena Stewart and Nafisa Collier helped define an era of dominance with disciplined half-court basketball and structured offensive systems. That style has produced incredible success, especially for teams representing the United States on the global stage. But the arrival of Caitlin Clark has started to challenge that entire structure. Clark doesn't just play within the traditional rhythm of the game. She speeds everything up. Her deep shooting range stretches defenses far beyond their comfort zone, and her quick decision-making forces teams to react almost instantly. The result is a faster, more unpredictable offensive style that looks very different from the slower half-court sets many veteran teams have relied on for years. That difference in style is where the debate begins. Some analysts argue that veteran leadership and experience are essential for winning championships. Players who have spent years in high-pressure situations often bring stability and decision-making that younger stars are still developing. From that perspective, easing Clark into the lineup and allowing established players to lead the offense makes sense. But others see it very differently. Fans watching the game noticed that the pace, ball movement, and overall energy shifted dramatically when Clark entered the floor. The offense opened up, teammates found easier scoring opportunities, and the defense suddenly looked stretched trying to contain her range. That contrast sparked a bigger question across basketball discussions. When a generational talent emerges, should the system adjust around them immediately? History shows that sports eventually evolve around players who push the boundaries of what's possible. The challenge is that those transitions rarely happen smoothly. Veterans have earned their roles through years of work, while new stars arrive with the potential to reshape everything overnight. And right now, women's basketball appears to be standing directly in the middle of that transition. To understand why this debate has become so intense, you have to go back to the moment that started it all, the Olympic roster announcement. When the lineup for the United States women's national basketball team was revealed for the 2024 Olympic Games, one name immediately stood out for its absence: Caitlin Clark. For many fans, the decision came as a shock. Clark had just completed one of the most talked-about college careers in basketball history. She shattered scoring records, packed arenas across the country, and became one of the most recognizable faces in the entire sport. Her deep shooting range, fast-paced playmaking, and highlight reel passes had turned her into a global basketball phenomenon almost overnight. Yet when the final roster was announced, Clark was not included. The official explanation from the selection committee focused on experience and team chemistry. Decision-makers emphasized that international competition is different from the professional league. They argued that Olympic tournaments require players who already understand the national team system and have experience playing together on the world stage. But that explanation didn't convince everyone. Almost immediately, sports analysts and fans began questioning whether the roster truly represented the best possible lineup. Across talk shows, podcasts, and social media, people pointed out that Clark's unique skill set, especially her ability to stretch defenses and create offense, could have added a completely different dimension to the team. Some commentators supported the committee's choice, arguing that veteran players like Breena Stewart and Nafisa Collier had already proven themselves in international competition and deserved to keep their roles. From that perspective, building around experienced players made sense for a short Olympic tournament. But others believed the decision reflected something deeper. Online discussions quickly turned into a larger debate about whether the system favored seniority over generational talent. Supporters of Clark argued that her impact on the court and her ability to draw massive audiences made her one of the most important players in the sport. And as Clark continued delivering impressive performances in the professional league, the controversy surrounding that Olympic decision only grew louder. As the debate continued to grow, another topic started appearing more and more in basketball discussions: the sheer influence Caitlin Clark now has on the sport itself. At first, most of the conversation focused on her performances on the court, but over time, people began noticing something even bigger happening around her games. Wherever Clark plays, attention follows. Arena attendance has surged when her team comes to town. Cities that previously struggled to fill seats are suddenly hosting packed crowds eager to see her play. Fans arrive hours before tip-off, hoping to watch one of the most exciting offensive players the league has seen in years. The television numbers tell a similar story. Games featuring Clark consistently draw some of the highest ratings in women's basketball. Networks have begun placing her matchups in prime viewing slots because they know audiences will tune in. Even casual sports fans, people who may not have followed the league closely before, have started watching just to see the highlights she produces. And that's where the conversation becomes even more interesting. Clark doesn't just elevate the excitement around her own performances. Many analysts believe she raises the level of the players around her. Her passing ability creates easier scoring chances for teammates, while her deep shooting range forces defenses to stretch far beyond their normal positioning. When she shares the floor with talented players like Angel Reese, the offensive possibilities become even more dangerous. Reese's strength around the rim, combined with Clark's playmaking, creates a pick-and-roll combination that many defenders struggle to contain. Then there's the potential backcourt dynamic with players like Paige Bueckers. Fans and analysts have already started imagining what an offense could look like if two elite playmakers with scoring ability and court vision shared the floor together. Defenses wouldn't be able to focus on just one threat, which could open the game up in completely new ways. Because of all this, Clark's influence is now being discussed as more than just individual talent. Many observers believe she represents a shift in how the sport is played and marketed. And as her impact continues to grow, both statistically and culturally, the conversation about where she fits in the future of the game is only getting louder. What we might actually be witnessing right now is something bigger than a single roster decision or one controversial coaching choice. Many analysts believe this moment represents the beginning of a completely new era in women's basketball, and at the center of that shift is Caitlin Clark. For years, the sport has been dominated by a system built around structured half-court offense, veteran leadership, and carefully designed sets. That approach produced incredible success for the United States women's national basketball team and helped establish players like Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier as some of the most respected stars in the game. But the style of play that Clark brings is fundamentally different. Her deep shooting range forces defenses to stretch much farther than they traditionally would. Instead of defenders waiting near the three-point line, they're often forced to pick her up the moment she crosses half-court. That single adjustment changes the spacing of the entire floor. Once the defense stretches outward, driving lanes open up. Passing lanes appear where none existed before. The pace of the offense increases, and teammates suddenly find themselves with more room to operate. This faster, more open style of play is something many younger players are embracing as the game continues to evolve. When Clark shares the floor with dynamic athletes like Angel Reese or elite guards such as Paige Bueckers, the potential combinations become even more exciting. One player's shooting gravity can open opportunities for another's cutting or scoring ability. Instead of relying on slow half-court execution, offenses can attack quickly and force defenses into constant adjustments. That shift in tempo and spacing is why so many people believe the sport is entering a transitional phase. Every generation eventually brings players who redefine what's possible on the court. In basketball history, those moments often change not only how the game is played, but also how it's marketed, watched, and discussed around the world. Clark's rise appears to be creating that kind of moment. The real question now is whether women's basketball will evolve. It already is. The bigger question is how quickly teams, coaches, and entire systems will adapt to a style of play that is moving faster than ever before. And that brings us to the biggest question now hanging over the entire league. It's not just about one game, one coaching decision, or even one Olympic roster. The real debate is about the future direction of the sport itself, and where players like Caitlin Clark fit into that future. For years, professional basketball, especially on the international stage, has relied on stability. Veteran stars such as Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier helped build a culture based on experience, chemistry, and carefully structured offensive systems. That formula produced championships and one of the most dominant national teams in sports history. But every era eventually reaches a moment when a new generation arrives. Clark's impact has accelerated that moment faster than many people expected. Her style of play, deep shooting, quick decisions, and constant pace has forced defenses to rethink how they approach the game. Teams can no longer rely solely on traditional half-court sets and controlled tempo when facing a player who can stretch the floor the moment she crosses midcourt. And it's not just her performance on the court that's changing things. Clark's presence has brought a surge of attention to women's basketball. Packed arenas, rising television ratings, and viral highlights have introduced the sport to millions of new viewers. That level of exposure naturally creates pressure on teams, coaches, and league officials to adapt to the changing landscape. Which leads to the question many fans are now asking. Should teams continue prioritizing veteran hierarchy, where players earn roles based on years of experience and past accomplishments? Or should generational talent be given the opportunity to lead immediately when their impact becomes impossible to ignore? History suggests that when transformative players emerge, the sport eventually evolves around them. The process isn't always smooth, and debates like the one happening now are often part of that transition. But one thing is becoming clear. The conversation about Clark is no longer just about her individual career. It's about how quickly the rest of the basketball world is willing to adjust to the future that may already be arriving.